There's a lot of good news this week, I must say. Reopening of China. We've got a warmer winter than expected in Europe. Maybe not a recession over there. In the United States, inflation numbers are coming down. Are you rethinking some of what you said in the past about the likelihood of recession?
I think it is good news, and the evidence that there's been some wage restraint is part of the good news. But at the same time, I think one has to be careful of false dawns. And if you think about it, the good news was inflation running in the sixes, and that's still inconceivably high by the standards of 2 or 3 years ago. So I would stick with my view that a recession this year is more likely than not. But certainly looking at some of these trends, one has to think that the Fed's job is much, much closer to being done, feels much closer to being done in terms of disinflation than it did a few months ago. And I think the more optimistic possibilities, while they still would not be my bet, look more plausible today than they did several months ago. And that's got to be encouraging. We'll have to be watching the data very, very closely. And the most important day of this month, by far, from a macroeconomic point of view, will be the last day of the month when the employment cost index comes out. That's the gold standard measure of labor costs and wage pressure. And that's a number they'll be studying very, very closely at the Fed, and I suspect on Wall Street. And I'll certainly be up early that morning to get that number.
So right after that, actually early in February, we're going to have the meeting of the Federal Reserve. Given where we are right now, and it's always data dependent, should they at least be talking about a pause, if not in February, coming after that?
I think we're still not quite at that point. I don't think a pause in February would be well advised, and I don't think we have to make a definite decision beyond February for right now. Again, I think the most important thing is to make sure that the job of containing inflation gets done, and that they preserve their credibility. So I think it's a little bit premature at this point to be thinking about pausing, but we're getting much closer to that day.
Larry, another big story this week had to deal with air traffic in the United States, as we had to ground all the airplanes because of an apparent problem with the FAA system. This is something you've referred to in the past, actually, some doubts about the system. Does this raise larger questions about the systems we have in the government, at the FAA and perhaps other places as well, like the IRS, and the need for investment?
Look, I think it refers to two things, David. I think it refers to the quantity of resources that we invest, and it refers to the competence with which we invest. Something is wrong when tens of millions of returns sit opened at the IRS. Something is wrong when the IRS answers the phone less than a fifth of the time. Something is wrong when these kinds of fiascos happen with our air traffic control system. Some of this is we just don't invest the resources that we need. Look, I'm not enough of an expert to exactly be able to compare the information technology challenges that an institution like the IRS, receiving billions of forms each year, has with the information technology faced by a large bank like JP Morgan, but it feels very wrong to me that the IRS's IT budget is only 3.5% of that of JP Morgan. But at the same time and equally, this is about the competence of the investment process. Some of it goes to punitive regulation, which causes excessive delays and makes even the simplest projects drag on forever.
So, Larry, it's a matter of money and competence. On the money front, where are we going to find that money? Because right now there's a lot of concern with the deficit. You have some members of Congress on the Republican side saying we should walk up to and maybe over the precipice of a default.
A default would be a catastrophe. It would mean higher borrowing costs forever. It would cost the country billions of dollars to no important benefit. Of all the economic debates in Washington, the debt limit debates are the dumbest ones, since there's no question where they're going to end. If I've got a problem with how one of my kids have spent money, that's something my family and I have to work out, but we don't think that defaulting to Visa is an option for working through the situation. But look, I think the issues of debt accumulation are going to come back onto the national horizon. My view is, in light of everything that's happening, we are going to have to very substantially increase our national security expenditures in the years ahead, both hard power issues like direct military spending, ammunition and the like, and soft power national security issues like climate change.
Larry, China was back in the news this week once again. The new Congress, one of the first things they did was almost unanimously agree there should be a select committee to investigate so-called threats from China. At the same time, President Biden met with the Prime Minister of Japan to put some more pressure on him about semiconductor technology and China. We're about to have Global Wall Street meet over in Davos, Switzerland. What is the situation with respect to globalization, particularly with respect to China, but more broadly?
Look, that'll be very much in the air on in Davos, and when we're both there, David, I'll look forward to discussing it with you on Bloomberg. I do think that we need an approach other than an approach that's about suppressing the Chinese economy and tearing China down. We need to focus on building ourselves up as our central route to prosperity and our central route to security. Of course, there are certain technologies that we shouldn't be sharing, but as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has said, our approach should be small garden, high walls in defining what that set of technologies are. But the most important thing is doing everything we can to make sure that we are always pushing the envelope and moving forward. I think we also need to emphasize, and the Biden administration has done that.
Larry, we got word this week that Microsoft is at least contemplating substantially increasing its investment in OpenAI, which is, of course, where we got ChatGPT from, something you brought to Wall Street Week a while ago now. I know you've been following this closely. Where are we with things like ChatGPT and other forms of AI?
You know, what one hears from the experts is that there are proprietary systems inside some of the major companies that are even a generation past ChatGPT. So I think this is coming at us very hard and is going to touch almost every aspect of life. Certainly for those of us in education, the ability of machines to write essays is raising all kinds of questions about what constitutes a student's own work. On the other hand, those are tools that are going to enable us to figure things out and make progress on problems much faster than we did before. So this is an area where all the various stakeholders need to be thinking very hard. There's enormous potential in this, but as with other innovations like the internet, like the steam engine, there are potential implications, both good and bad, and I think it needs very much to rise in terms of how prominent it is in our national discussions.